Okay, so John, Terry, we are here together. This is our third recording that we're doing, trying to capture some of the stories that you guys have as the founders of what is now known as AIM. So in our first video, we were exploring your personal first experiences of God and your own kind of conversion and journey with Him, and then how that led you to overlap. Our second video, we looked more about what you were discovering in that the early days of your relationship, how you kind of built around that and what it looked like practically. So today we want to kind of continue that journey. So the first question I want to put, and if Terry, you start off with this one. So how did what you discovered in those early days of honoring, preferring each other, prioritizing spending time together, capturing each other's flow of the spirit, that real kind of the gold that you discovered. How did what you discovered then lead to what is now referred to as AIM?
Yeah, well, there's several stories. And in some ways, it was an accident. When we started out, we never dreamed about this becoming a network and family of churches all over the world. And yet, all my life, since the early 70s when I became a pastor, I was looking for a better way. I have nothing against denominations, but I did not like being called independent. I thought that was terrible. So what is the better way? And so then I even wrote a book back in the little booklet back about 1974, Searching the Scriptures. How can we build together in such a way that we're not a pyramid? And John Dean gave that vocabulary. John had the vocabulary of horizontal, building horizontal. And I mean, the story is we were meeting every couple times, 2 or 3 times a year for prayer and waiting on the Lord and planning. And we were meeting on a mountain near my house here. I think you've been to the mountain. And one of us, I don't even know who it was. There was probably at least 3 of us at that point, maybe 4. Someone said, "It's so good when the 4 of us are together. How much better could it be if we invited our sons to come together, all our sons, and meet together for a retreat, like a smaller conference?" And that, in many ways, in my thinking, is when AIM was born. And that's when people began pressing us for a name. What is a name? And we had lots of ideas. I had great ideas. Terrible, actually. I'm not good at names. But John Dean had the name.
Let me back up just for a minute.
Yeah.
And answer the question, and then I'll share with you the name. Terry and I as we began to travel together, all of a sudden there was a trust. I would say AIM came out of trust. We just trusted one another. And when you trust somebody, it's kind of like your wife. You trust, and the first thing you want to do is share. And we were quick to trust, and we were quick to begin to share our own relationships with the other person because of that trust and that love that we had for one another. And that sort of propelled everything from there. And then we get into Terry's explanation here. I think it was Kurt Lyons that said we need to call ourselves something, and rather than just a traveling team. And I think Terry, we were happy with what we were doing, because I mean, you can't get any better than trusting one another and traveling together. That's the peak right there. So Kurt Lyons said, well, we need to call each other something. and we need to call this group. And so we all went home and began to think about it and pray about it. And sitting in my garden room, Karen says, I think it should be Alliance International Ministries, because what you're talking about is an alliance. You're not creating a denomination, but an alliance of ministries. And it's international because that's what you guys do. And so I brought that back and we prayed about it, and our first meeting was the alliance, but the alliance didn't start with the 35 people who got together. The alliance started, even though it was not called that, the alliance started with Terry and I.
That's
because
true.
of trust. And so if you take the trust out of it, you don't have anything. And so that's my answer to your question.
And trust means no competition, no comparison. You're strengthening each other. You're synergizing. Alliance was important to me. As soon as John said it, I lived in Zimbabwe for 5 years, and in Zimbabwe, everything's based on a family. There's fathers and there's sons. And when you ask someone who lives in Harare, the capital, where do you come from? They always talk about the rural area, their home area. I am a Savanda. I am a Maziri. They name it, but their family name is more important than their national name. And that showed me something about the Old Testament. I really believe that most men, if they were asked, what are you? They would not say Israelite. They would say, I'm a Judite. I'm Benjamite. They would name their tribe first. Their tribe came first, for it was horizontal. And they came together for specific purposes, for war and for worship. And that's what Alliance International Ministry stands for. I almost don't like AIM sometimes because it robs us of that vision statement. Alliance is, we come together for war, to take the nations, to plant churches, to train leaders, and for worship. When we come together as a family, we worship. So that word alliance, when John brought that back, that brought in my head an explosion almost of, this is what I've been looking for all these years.
The term AIM says something entirely different to me than alliance does. An alliance is horizontal. It is, we all are our own people, our own ministries, but we have chosen out of relationship and trust to come together and walk together. AIM, on the other hand, now this is just me. AIM, on the other hand, is like an organization. It's like a company. It's like something that doesn't have the same life in it as what Terry and I had through that alliance together. And so I use the term, but I've always had a little check in my spirit because I think, yeah, that's the acronym, but that's not what Terry and I are about. We've joined on a different level, and this is the level that we would hope that others in this whole organization, this whole spread out alliance would connect on that same level, and not just I'm joining AIM.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it sounds faceless, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, your dad's an example. He was looking for something that was horizontal. He didn't want to come under. He didn't want to come over. He wanted to come alongside.
Yeah.
And there must be over a dozen now men all over the world, apostles who have done that. And each had their own family, their own sphere, 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And so that's how Amos has grown. Apostle by apostle, family by family, sphere, very important word, sphere, around the world. And that's been so fun. Trust, like John said, you're right, you're right.
But I just
Building trust among those men.
I wanted to pick up that term there, trust, because that seems so important in John's description. And so within that, you're talking about when you have trust, you're more willing to share, more willing to be vulnerable, more willing to be open-handed. There's not the same competition. Why do you think trust is so novel when it comes to lots of gatherings of Christians? Like you'd think trust should be a default position of those that claim to follow Jesus, but yet you've been searching and you've not found this in many places.
Yeah, and this is my easy answer is insecurity. Insecurity. I define insecurity as the fear of being rejected. The fear of being rejected. And I think so many men, every man battles for identity. And in our thinking, identity means who's over me and who's under me. When I sit on the airplane, almost the first question is, what do you do for a living? Why are they asking that question? They're trying to find out, is he over me? Is he under me? And in AIM, we're trying to figure out how we can walk together, not like this. And this is trust, this level here. And it's just unnatural. It's just unnatural for men. We want to compare, we want to compete, and to trust it means to synergize, to walk together.
If I have one concern, I've never even shared this with Terry. This will be the first time he heard it too. If I have one concern, it's that when our influence is out, their and mine, then we will begin to revert to an organization rather than that trust relationship where we are joined at the hip. That concerns me, and I haven't said it because I didn't want anything negative to come out of my mouth, but
It's true.
But even now, I see fringes of that, and I think about that a lot because anyway, that's my concern.
I mean, that is an important point that is something that I would like to explore a little bit more. It's something that I think is relevant for a number of different settings. And when I was sharing back in the last summit, I spoke on maintaining the movement and not the machine, and how in order to keep the pilgrimage going, the new leaders need to capture a sight of the same God that inspired the founders to start the journey in the first place. Otherwise, all we do is replicate the machinery that has grown out of the journey of the founders. And so I'm very interested in how do you, what is your role as a founder to guard, promote, to highlight, to reaffirm those key values, and what is the role of younger guys like me that are coming up to make sure that we grasp the right thing and continue the movement forward? I don't know if you can comment on that.
I think the only way to have that is the way that we had it. We had a hunger for God first. And we didn't have a hunger to join. That was what Terry, I think, wanted to get away from the whole denominational thing, but to something to link.
Yes.
And I do see a difference in just joining and linking together.
Yes, yes.
So that's not where you're gonna get it. You gotta have that deep hunger in your heart for God.
And I think a key aspect of trust is genuine humility.
Yeah,
Not humility like I'm a worm and I'm not any good or anything, but honoring humility. John's much older than I am. He has much more experience, but he chose to humble himself and walk beside me. And I learned from it. I grew from it, and I hope I contributed something also. So I think that's a key for you. Anyone who comes alongside AIM. Some guys have come and left because they wanted to climb a ladder. We don't have a ladder.
we
There's no
don't
way to
have.
move up the ladder. There's no salaries. None of us get a salary. In fact, the key team members contribute something every month. We give to make the office work. There's no ladder. So if you're looking for a position, if you're looking for a title, that's not humility, and you're not going to be happy in AIM. But if you want a place of safety, place of energy, combined anointing is powerful. This is the place.
Humility and that hunger for God. And you hear that in those original stories where God captured you guys, set your heart ablaze for him and started you on that journey. I can think of lots of leaders that would have similar stories where God has grabbed their hearts, but have not been able to build what you've built. Why do you think that is?
I think eventually you get full of yourself.
Yeah.
You think you did something. The fact of it is, Terry and I did nothing except relate. We have had other team members, but from my vantage point, there was Terry and I. We invited other team members to be a part just to keep things right. And but from my vantage point, it started with Terry and I, and we share and we trust, and I'm linked different with him than I am with anybody else. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's it.
And I would say the great test, back to your question about other men, I'm not judging anyone, I'm not going to judge, for all of us, the great test is success. I might have got that from you, John. The great test is success.
Yes.
Failure drives us to God, but success drives us to ourselves. Just like you were saying, John, we begin to think highly of ourselves. And I think it's good for us to be together because we remind each other, wait a minute, you're not the answer here. There's no superstar. John talks about we below the radar. Our name is not famous. Our organization is not famous. We're not in any magazines. We're not looking for any interviews. I've been asked several times to go on television, Christian television, and talk about AIM. I'm not interested. I stay below the radar. And if God wants us to grow, he brings relationships. We're not recruiting, we're growing by relationships. And that's success is a great test. Make sure your success is based on trust, as John said, and humility.
So, as John, you're describing really the precious relationship that God has forged between you and Terry, there was a desire to open that up, to invite others into that. To what extent is that feasible or possible when there's something so special? Would you think that relationships could form to a similar degree, or even if it was maybe at 20%, it would still be a value for others to experience?
Well, I don't want to use us as some great model up here that look at us. That's the last thing I want to do. I mean, we're down here below the radar. We're ground workers, trying to hit this thing on the ground level and minister to those that are sick and afflicted and needy, and on that level, rather than those that don't need you. You know, that's what Jesus did. And hopefully, if you just watch us and walk with us, that you'll find us going down that avenue that nobody else wants to go. I'm one of those that likes to go from house to house and minister to the ones and the twos and the threes and that type of thing. And I think without sounding proud, that's kind of what Jesus did. And even though he ministered to the thousands, Terry and I both have ministered to the thousands, but that's not our deal. We have to be put in that because of where we walk otherwise. And I would hope that people would look at us and say, well, the biggest thing I can see about those guys is they love the Lord with all their heart. I want to do that. At whatever price that is, I want to do that. And they love and respect and trust one another. So therefore, they can walk together and from a horizontal standpoint, and there's no age, there's no education, there's no nothing, just two guys walking together, trying to do the work of the Lord. I don't know if I confused you or what, but anyway, that's kind of the way I see it.
John. That's great. And I hope that we're a model, that there's other men who look at us and say, we can do that. Right, in aim. There's some guys that John's closer to than I am. I'm closer to others than he is. But there's others that are just, they're their own relationship outside of John and I. We walk together because we're the same nation. Tribes make up a nation. And that I think that Old Testament model is very, 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 very interesting. So, and I hope that AIM could be, and it has been already. There's already other organizations who come up to us and said, how do you do it? And we can hand them a document and we can say, now they have to capture the heart of it, because just following some rules will not make it work. It's got to be God, a relationship with God, the truth, trust with each other. But back to the point. I hope that when others see John and they say, I want that also with someone. I want that also with someone. And I'm willing to pay the price. We haven't talked really about that. John and I, if there was no AIM, little would change. Because we're talking to each other. We'd still be traveling together. We did it because we love the Lord and we have a calling. AIM was just kind of the trailer that followed afterwards. So first things first, ministry, following Jesus, and then working together. That's a model that others can follow.
That's really helpful.
Yes.
Let me take it a slightly different direction now. Zooming out a little bit. What would you say is your mantra of your life? What theme do you come back to? If your life has been a billboard for God to write on, what has He written on you?
Well, I think it would break down into a three-part. Number one, always remain green and growing. Never get too smart. Always remain. The second part would be no small thinking. Always think beyond your ability. Think in God's ability. And number three would be to always follow the fire.
That's you, John. That is so accurate. That's hard to follow. That is so, all three of those.
You should have gone first, Terry. That's
But it's true. Everything he said is true. I watched it for all these years. All three of those are exactly the case.
Wow.
And a good example for me and for others. And I wonder myself, I asked Linda, my wife, last week, what do you think people will remember? And I'm not sure. I'm still trying to think I hope they'll say he was in love with Jesus. He followed his calling. He did not have a job, he had a calling. You can't retire from a calling. And part of my calling is to train leaders. And part of that calling is to be a part of working with John to build a model in AIM. I believe AIM is the answer for reaching the many around the world for Jesus. Not people joining AIM necessarily, but replicating, taking the model and building horizontally. So to me, that's exciting when someone says, yeah, well, this is what I've been looking for all my life. So not famous, we're not famous, but we're certainly hundreds now all over the world. And I want that to be something I leave behind.
My other question here, what would you want to see accomplished in this world in order for you to feel that you'd accomplished your mission here?
You know, when I stepped away from the church and put another young man in my place, someone said something about, well, we have a wonderful building, over 30,000 square feet, right in the middle of our city, in the best street in town, the best location in town, in the center of the city. And it's in great condition now. It was terrible before, but I talked about that being my inheritance, and I almost cried. I don't want a building to be my inheritance. I want men, not hundreds, maybe a dozen. Jesus had 11. If I could impact 11 men and see them closer to Jesus, finding their calling, pursuing Jesus, pursuing their calling, not running their race, not someone else's race. Yeah, that would be exactly what my heart would long for.
If I could know for sure and hear the voice of Jesus saying, well done.
And I guess I believe that would mean something different for each one of us. Listening, hearing from him, walking with him every moment, not every day, every moment. I used to have a man, he's actually lived on the street, a little probably mentally ill, difficult. He would come into our building because we were right in the center of town. He'd come in for Sunday. He'd often walk up to me and say, Terry, how did you become an apostle? I think he was looking for some kind of 5 steps. I said, Mike, I had a choice to make, yes or no.
Mhm.
It's that simple. It's yes or no. It was a calling. I didn't ask for it. It looked for me. He found me. He rescued me. He gave me a calling. So it all goes back to Jesus. And will he say, well done? And if you say yes every time, he'll say, yeah, well done.
Mm. Yeah, it's quite different to how the world would answer that question. A lot of it would be based on what is the legacy that could be witnessed, could be seen, the size of the organization, the number of followers,
Numbers.
the numbers, buildings. Yeah.
One of the most important classes in our school is taught by John Guidos, called Philosophy of Ministry. What is your personal philosophy of ministry? And if it's not Jesus in the center, I mean, that's just talk. It could be just talk, but it better be your heart. If your heart doesn't long for Jesus, to please him, if all this goes away, do you still please him? Well, then you really don't have anything.
Mm. So another question that I've got here is what would be your advice for the likes of me, someone that's grown up witnessing the giants that have walked the land before us, in terms of you guys or my own father, that we're on the same train track, but maybe a few stations behind you guys. What would you suggest that I do?
Well, from my standpoint, I think the answer to that question is found at the altar. Because, like you said, having grown up in under such a marvelous tutor and trainer, sometimes we can be so caught up in being a reflection that we don't create our own reflection. And I think the only way we can do that is just spend time, a lot of time, at the altar with God until you're broken. Not broken to the point of hurting you, but broken to the point of the shell that surrounds you separates you and let the chick inside out. And because even though you've been mentored and all of that, you're your own man. And you got to find that man, because otherwise you'll always reflect just what you've seen, and you never get away from that. But God saved you, and there's got to be that one-on-one relationship with you, and you've got to create your own destiny in God with the framework of everything that you've been taught. You never get rid of the framework, but the only way you can find that out, what you are, is a lot of time being broken at the altar and just making Jesus not just a savior, but a walking partner. And not just a partner as in the sense that Terry and I are partners, but in the sense that he's your heart, mind, soul, and spirit. I know I'm rambling here, but I hope you're understanding what I'm trying to say. In other words, I spent a lot of time talking to him and at the altar. And it's not easy to, you might say, well, I have been broken. I've been broken here, there. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a heart type of thing in him that even when his name is mentioned, something goes off in you. Terry, get me out of this hole here. Explain what I'm
Oh,
trying
you're
to say.
exactly right, John. You're exactly right. And I'm going to contradict myself. I said, I think that we can be an example to others. And yet, Jamie, I say, don't get trapped in our box.
Boy, that's a good
When I
word.
came home from Manila, I lived 5 years in Zimbabwe, 4 years in the Philippines. I had no idea what came next. I had 2 sons in high school, had a wife, we had to feed them, I had to find a house for them. What do I do now? I had good invitations to Hong Kong, to Chicago, to Michigan, big ministries. And the Lord kept saying no. And in fact, for about 6 months, I worked as a diesel mechanic, working on diesel trucks. That's humbling. $10 an hour. Dirty, ugly. But I had to do that because I did not know what AIM looked like. I didn't know about AIM. I had no vocabulary. I couldn't say I had a vision because I had no idea. I needed John, I needed to work together to discover and find out what AIM was. So what is your crucible? Where is your place where God says, I want to talk to you, I want to lead you, but Abraham went out not knowing where he was going. He had to walk day by day, just like John said, moment by faith. So who is it that God's building you with, and where is he taking you? We can be an example of faith and principles, but I don't get in our box. Don't get trapped in our box. The world's
That's
changing
good
so
word.
fast.
Good
So
word.
fast.
So anticipating some of the friction that comes for the generation after the founders, there's often the thought of, if we change this, do we dishonor those that have gone before us? And there's almost a sentimentality or a sense of burden to do things in a similar way, or even if it's trying to grasp the same values, the way that those values are pursued almost becomes a kind of a tradition that is followed. Anticipating those type of thoughts could be a challenge for the next generation. What would you say to that?
Dishonor.
Methods that change. Methods that should change. Values should never change.
Right.
The word is the word. If you keep those two things in mind, then it's okay for you to change the method of something, because Terry and I just came along. As a matter of fact, we really didn't have a method. The only thing, we were just lovers of each other and lovers of God, and the people came to us. We did not go to them. As a matter of fact, as Terry said a while ago, we didn't try to build anything. The last 2 or 3 times that I've heard the juniors talk, they talk about, well, we could get this one to join or that one to join, or they could join, or we could do this, and they would join. And I'm thinking, it's not about joining. It really is not about joining. It's about relationship. And out of that, you walk together. And if we can serve you in a credential after a relationship, then that's okay. But you don't do these things to get people to join, because then that becomes AIM rather than the alliance.
Mhm.
And so yes, methods can change, values cannot change.
That's right. And ultimately, dishonor is not an action, it's a heart issue. If the heart honors, then your action will honor also. But if the heart becomes proud, is lifted up, if it becomes dishonorable in your heart, it's going to manifest itself. But ultimately, it's a heart issue. And my heart is to be one of the elders sitting at the city gate. The guy's dropping by and saying, well, what do you think? How can we settle this issue? I don't want to be sitting on a pedestal. I want to be sitting at the gate. And I've been very, very happy, very excited recently. Oh, about 2 years ago, I started working with a young man over in West Virginia. Fairly large church, 3 services on Sunday. And when he was the youth pastor, the lead pastor said, well, I think it's time for you to step up. And he said, well, can you give me a couple of months to find another place to go to, find another house? He was living in a church house. He assumed that because he was stepping down, he should go away. And this young pastor said, please, don't go away. We need you. We need you. There's things you can do, I can't do. I need you to keep me on track. Stay in the church house. And today he's one of the elders. He's still one of the elders of the church. So I'm not making a talk about method, it's about heart. Heart. And the principle is, we said it from the beginning, trust and humility.
Mhm.
If you trust, if you're humble, then there'll be no friction. There'll be disagreements. There'll be no friction. If you trust and you're truly humble, those are 2 keys.
If there was not an alliance organization, that would not change a thing between Terry and I. Because we are what we are, period. And that's one thing. The second thing is, I would expect people such as yourself to come up with possibly better ways of doing what we do. And you're probably light years ahead of where I am right now, except for age. And so, yeah, I would expect some things to change as long as the values are there.